Imagine coordinating, I don't know, like 1,000 people to drag a 10-ton stone across a really harsh, arid landscape.
Right, which is an absolute nightmare logistically.
Yeah, exactly. Now imagine carving these complex interlocking animal shapes into that stone and then standing it perfectly upright in this super precise geometric alignment.
Oh, and doing all of that without a written language.
Yeah.
Right.
And here's the kicker. Doing it without the wheel, without a king or some pharaoh barking orders,
Yeah.
and without a single farm to actually feed your workers.
Which, sounds completely impossible based on what we all learned growing up.
It really does. Because according to the textbook history that you and I were probably taught in school, that scenario literally cannot happen.
Right, the classic narrative of civilization.
Yeah, we're taught that first, humans figured out how to plant seeds. Then, because they had farms, they settled down. Then they built cities, invented writing to keep track of their grain, and then, and only after all of that, did they have the organization to build massive monuments.
Yeah, it treats complex thought, religion, and monumental architecture almost entirely as a byproduct of having an economic surplus. The underlying assumption has always been no farming, no monuments.
Okay, let's unpack this,
Oh.
because today we are throwing that textbook script completely out the window.
Totally out the window.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are exploring a truly staggering stack of recent academic papers by Anthony von Doom.
And this isn't just, some rogue fringe theory.
No, not at all. We are looking at a massive synthesis of cognitive anthropology, neuroanatomical fossil records, and raw archaeological data sets from all across the globe. Von Doom details something called the Deep Symbolic Systems Model, or DSSM.
It's a really incredible framework.
It is. Our mission today is to figure out how early humans actually built complex societies and massive stone monuments thousands of years before they ever invented farming or cities or writing.
What's fascinating here is that to understand those very first physical monuments, we actually have to stop looking at the stones themselves.
Wait, really? Then what are we looking at?
We have to look at the invisible architecture of the human mind. Von Doom introduces this core concept of cognitive scaffolds.
Cognitive scaffolds. Okay, I like the sound of that.
Yeah, to really grasp how a prehistoric society functions, we are going to take you on a journey starting about 1.5 million years ago. We'll trace how the brain developed these invisible scaffolds all the way up to the dawn of written history.
So we are basically talking about a major hardware upgrade here. Because, to build a multi-ton stone monument, you need incredible organization.
Oh, absolutely.
You need to plan, you need to share really complex rules with your community, and you need a way to remember those rules across generations.
Right, which is a massive cognitive load.
Exactly. So before humans could upgrade their physical world with architecture, they needed an entirely new processing system in their own heads. So how exactly did a prehistoric brain get ready for civilization?
Well, it was a slow, cumulative process. DSSM breaks this evolution down into a few distinct phases. Phase 1 starts way back between 1.5 million and 300,000 years ago.
That is a massive chunk of time.
It is. And it starts with early hominins creating what are known as Acheulean hand axes.
Okay, let me stop you right there, because when I hear hand axe, I just picture like a caveman smashing two rocks together until one gets sharp.
Right, yeah, that is the common misconception. But when you actually examine a late Acheulean hand axe, you see this deliberate, consistent form. It has near-perfect bilateral symmetry.
Oh, wow. So it's not just random chipping.
Not at all. To achieve that teardrop shape over and over again requires what cognitive scientists call multi-stage planning and internal rule-based production schemas.
So they aren't just reacting to the rock as it breaks. They actually have a plan.
Far from it. The maker has to hold a mental template of the finished, idealized tool in their working memory.
Like a blueprint in their head.
Exactly. Then they have to constantly evaluate their physical progress against that invisible template, executing a sequence of very specific measured strikes to, reveal the shape hidden inside the raw stone.
I love this. It is basically the prehistoric equivalent of a software algorithm.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
The Acheulean hand axe is physical proof that early humans could download a multi-step program, hold it in their working memory, and execute it flawlessly in the physical world.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. Those internal algorithms were the foundational cognitive technologies of our species.
Cognitive technologies, I like that phrasing.
Yeah, because once you can hold a complex sequence in your head for a tool, you can start applying that same cognitive sequencing to social behaviors. You can distribute the cognitive load across a group.
Ah, I see. So it scales up.
Exactly. Think about coordinated large game hunts or transporting specific raw materials over dozens of miles. To do that, a group needs temporal sequencing of tasks, who does what and when.
Right. You can't just wing a mammoth hunt.
Definitely not. Shared conventions and a collective procedural memory had to exist as an invisible network before anyone ever painted a cave wall or carved a stone.
Wait, though. Evolution is notoriously lazy, right? Our bodies do not burn extra calories on bigger, more complex brains unless it is an absolute matter of life and death.
Oh, for sure. Brain tissue is incredibly expensive, calorically speaking.
Right. So why wouldn't these early humans just keep using their hand-axe algorithms and call it a day? What forced them to actually push this new brain power into overdrive?
To answer that, we have to look at phase 2, which runs from about 300,000 to 50,000 years ago. This is where we see true anatomical modernization.
Like actual biological changes?
Yes. Fossil evidence, like the remains found at Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, shows a distinct expansion of the parietal and temporal lobes in the brain. The skull is actually getting more globular.
So the hardware is physically expanding.
Exactly. The physical neuroanatomical substrate required for high-level abstraction. The hardware is now fully in place. But to your point about what forced them to use it, the catalyst was massive environmental and demographic stress.
You mean like a climate crisis?
A very severe one. Around 74,000 years ago, the Toba volcanic eruption created this brutal climatic bottleneck.
Well, I've heard of that. It practically wiped us out, didn't it?
It really did. The sky darkens, temperatures plummet, and ecosystems just collapse. Human populations are compressed into these tiny habitable refuge zones.
Wow.
And when your environment becomes incredibly hostile and completely unpredictable, you can no longer rely on being in the same physical place every year. You are forced to migrate.
And I guess you can't carry a bunch of heavy stuff with you.
Right. You are forced to rely on portable, orally transmitted knowledge systems just to survive.
Because if the elders forget which specific plants are poisonous during a famine, or they lose the mental map to the only active waterhole during a drought, your entire bloodline is erased.
The stakes were literally life and death. This extreme pressure really honed their ability to use ritual repetition as a mnemonic stabilizer.
A mnemonic stabilizer, like a memory tool.
Yeah, they had to create robust, shared symbolic systems that could survive without any external recordation.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we are approaching the paradox that breaks the textbook.
Right, the transition point.
Once the brain is fully wired for these shared cognitive templates, how do these early humans store and pass down this complex life-saving knowledge without writing a single word down?
Which is the big question.
According to DSSM, they start externalizing their memory into the physical world.
Yes, and this brings us to the core argument of the Deep Symbolic Systems Model. Von Doom proposes that early monumentality was driven almost entirely by ritual motivation and memory storage.
Not by an economic surplus.
Exactly. Not by having extra grain laying around. The shared beliefs, the survival data, and the ritual obligations, those were the things mobilizing the labor.
Hold on. I am picturing the sheer logistics of this. You are saying that hunter-gatherers, people who are actively foraging for their next meal, who have no permanent cities and no hierarchical state breathing down their necks.
Yep, nomadic people.
Somehow organized the staggering amount of labor required to move multi-ton stone pillars. And they did it entirely out of a shared need to anchor their ritual beliefs.
The archaeological record leaves us no other conclusion, honestly. If you look at the pre-pottery Neolithic sites in Anatolia.
Oh, like Göbekli Tepe.
Similar, yeah.
Or
Places like Karahan Tepe, Navali Sori, or Nepta Playa in Africa, these were built between 9,600 and 8,200 BCE.
So we are talking thousands of years before the pyramids.
Way before. And we see monumental stone architecture there. Massive T-shaped pillars arranged in these repeated geometric enclosures.
And they're covered in carvings, right?
Incredible zoomorphic iconography. Spiders, snakes, foxes, vultures. Yet there is almost no evidence of permanent domestic habitation.
Wait, really? No houses?
No sprawling residential neighborhoods, no administrative artifacts, no farming tools. These were non-urban, non-literate communities.
They are spending unbelievable amounts of calories to build these massive complexes, but they aren't even living in them.
Right, they're purely communal spaces.
So what are they actually doing inside these spaces?
They are using them as what DSSM calls mnemonic architectures. Think of them as physical memory palaces.
Memory palaces, like that technique where you picture walking through a house to remember a grocery list?
Exactly like that, but built in the real world. Because these societies did not have writing, they designed massive material environments to encode their cosmological, social, and survival knowledge.
Wow.
The physical space itself acts as the externalized memory of the group.
So what we used to think were just, crude temples to primitive gods,
Yeah.
were actually prehistoric public libraries.
Yeah, that's a brilliant way to frame it.
The monument is literally a database made of stone. But explain the mechanism to me. How does a carving of a fox on a stone pillar actually help a hunter-gatherer stabilize their memory?
It comes down to ritual movement and sensory engagement. Imagine standing in one of these enclosures at night.
Okay, setting the scene.
The firelight is flickering against the carved animals. Your group is chanting a specific oral history, moving in a specific circular pattern around the pillars.
So it's very active.
Highly active. The physical act of moving through that highly structured, constrained space, combined with the visual cues of the carvings, it physically wires the information into the procedural memory of the participants.
Oh, so it's muscle memory combined with visual memory.
Exactly. Repetitive ritual practice within these specific spatial constraints stabilizes the meaning of the symbols across generations. The elder doesn't just, tell you the rules, they walk you through the physical representation of the rules.
That is brilliant. You are essentially using the landscape to force the human brain to remember things it would otherwise forget.
And Von Doom is very quick to point out that we do not need to invoke ancient aliens or anomalous technologies or some lost, highly advanced civilization to explain this.
Right, no sci-fi required. Just highly motivated, highly intelligent humans.
Exactly. DSSM is a constraint-based mechanism grounded purely in cognitive anthropology. It is simply about humans using physical space to reduce the cognitive burden on individual memory.
Okay, let me push on the geography of this a bit.
Sure.
If this cognitive scaffolding is happening in places like Anatolia and North Africa, and we know that humans all over the globe got the same neuroanatomical hardware upgrade,
Right, the brain expansion.
then we should see this externalization happening everywhere, shouldn't we?
We absolutely do. But the physical evidence looks wildly different depending on the local environment and the materials at hand.
Oh, so they adapted to where they live.
Exactly. DSSM outlines 4 very specific criteria that must be met for a symbolic system to be considered truly stabilized. First is intergenerational repetition.
Meaning the symbolic system has to outlast the lifespan of any single person.
Right. Second is spatial constraint. The system dictates how people move, build, or organize their environment. Third is cross-media redundancy.
Meaning they don't just put all their eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Imagine a society where the shape of a sacred animal is carved into a giant stone pillar. That same shape is also woven into their baskets and etched into the small bone tools they carry.
Oh, I see. So if the stone pillar is buried in a mudslide, the symbol isn't lost.
Exactly. It is redundant across multiple mediums. Finally, the fourth criterion is persistence under stress. The symbolic system has to survive climate shifts, famines, or population bottlenecks without collapsing.
Wow, that's a rigorous set of criteria. How does that actually manifest in different parts of the world? I imagine a group living in a dense jungle solves this differently than a group living in a desert.
Oh, completely. Von Doom maps out distinct macro-regional pathways to show how adaptable this is. For example, in Egypt and Mesopotamia, cultures utilize what is called the axial river or stone anchor pathway.
Because of the big rivers there.
Right. They had the immense, predictable presence of the Nile and the Tigris-Euphrates rivers. Their symbolic stabilization was anchored into these permanent, massive landscapes, leading eventually to highly visible stone architecture and settlement repetition along the riverbanks.
But not everyone has a massive, geographically dominating river to anchor their entire civilization to.
Which is why East Asia, around the Yellow and Yangtze river basins, achieved stabilization through a completely different route, the portable or craft-based pathway.
Portable, so no big stones.
Right. Instead of building massive stone circles, they embedded their symbolic systems into durable, highly specialized, and incredibly difficult to make objects. Think of the intricate Hongshan jade carvings or the Jiahu bone flutes.
Oh, so the craftsmanship itself was the ritual.
Exactly. Then you have Mesoamerica, which utilized distributed ritual networks. The Olmecs, for instance, created portable ritual objects that were passed across vast distances.
Connecting people who might never even meet.
Yes. connecting disparate groups through a shared symbolic language rather than a shared massive temple. And in the Indus Valley, it was infrastructural embedding.
What does that mean?
It means the symbolism wasn't just in monuments, but was baked into highly standardized village layouts, drainage systems, and everyday crafts.
Man, I am picturing this like different operating systems achieving the exact same goal.
Oh, I like that. Like what?
Like iOS versus Android.
Yeah.
Some cultures essentially use giant stone monuments as their hard drives, physically anchoring their cultural database to the landscape,
Right?
while other cultures use these highly specific, pocket-sized jade crafts, like a prehistoric USB drive, to carry their cultural database across distributed networks. Both methods successfully externalize human memory. They just use different hardware.
That's a perfect analogy. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it completely recontextualizes the emergence of writing and those giant urban monuments we usually associate with civilization.
You mean things like the Egyptian pyramids or the Urlitu complexes in China?
Yeah.
Hold on. You are saying the invention of writing, the thing we literally define as the start of recorded history, was basically just an afterthought, just prehistoric shorthand for what they already knew.
Basically, yes.
Because according to the textbook, writing and pyramids are the starting lines of complex civilization.
Well, according to the raw data, they are actually the finish lines.
Really?
Yeah, there is a massive, undeniable timeline lag. Massive state monuments and formal writing systems like cuneiform emerging around 3100 BCE. They only appeared after the symbolic load in a society reached absolute saturation.
So writing didn't originate complex thought.
Not at all. Writing was just a formal compression of the complex symbolic structures that had been maintained orally, ritually, and architecturally for thousands of years prior.
Wow.
Society had accumulated so much data in their stone hard drives and jade USBs that they finally needed an index system to keep track of it all.
That makes so much sense.
And the apparent suddenness of writing in the historical record, it's mostly just a preservation bias. We can easily find a baked clay tablet in the dirt. We cannot dig up a spoken ritual or a spatial dance.
So what does this all mean? I mean, we have this incredibly elegant reframing of history. It makes intuitive sense. It connects the hand axe to the brain mutation, to the ritual pillars, to the invention of writing.
It connects all the dots beautifully.
But how do we actually prove it? How does DSSM hold up as rigorous science when we're dealing with people who lived tens of thousands of years ago?
That's the most important part, right? Fondum is unyielding about the scientific rigor of this model. DSSM isn't just some philosophical theory. It actually includes a formal decision matrix for archaeologists to use in the field.
Like a checklist.
Sort of. For a prehistoric system to be classified as DSSM saturated, it must score a 7 out of 8 on a strict ordinal rubric.
Based on those 4 criteria we discussed earlier.
Exactly. Repetition, constraint, redundancy, and persistence. And crucially, it requires clear, stratigraphically proven archaeological continuity lasting at least 500 years.
So it demands hard, quantifiable data in the dirt.
Yes. More importantly, it offers specific falsification conditions.
Falsification conditions meaning a way to prove it wrong.
Exactly. A theory isn't truly scientific unless you can clearly state what would prove it wrong. The Deep Symbolic Systems Model would be completely dismantled if archaeologists found monumental systems appearing before a stabilized symbolic system was in place.
Or if we found a writing system that emerged entirely independent of pre-existing symbolic cognition in that specific region.
Precisely.
Meaning if someone just suddenly invented an alphabet out of thin air with no deep history of repetitive ritual symbols or mnemonic architectures backing it up, the whole model falls apart.
Yes. If a society jumps straight from simple hand axes to a fully formed alphabet without the intermediate cognitive scaffolds, Von Doom's model is broken.
Has that ever happened?
No. To date, across all these macro regions, from Egypt to Mesoamerica to the Indus Valley to East Asia, no securely dated archaeological case meets those falsification criteria.
Wow, that is incredibly consistent.
The pattern holds universally. Symbolic stabilization, achieved through ritual and memory externalization, always precedes the monuments and the texts.
I want you, the listener, to just pause and reflect on the sheer resilience of these prehistoric people. We are talking about human beings who maintained complex, life-saving cultural databases for hundreds, sometimes thousands of generations.
It really is staggering to think about.
They survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, famines, and massive forced migrations, keeping their societal rules and survival knowledge perfectly intact without writing a single word down.
It forces us to stop viewing the tens of thousands of years before agriculture as some kind of primitive dark age where humans were just stumbling around waiting for a farming surplus to magically spark civilization.
Right, like they were just waiting for wheat to grow.
Exactly. Instead, we have to recognize it as a structurally coherent period of brilliant, cumulative cognitive evolution.
It is the ultimate story of human adaptability. Which brings us to the close of our deep dive today. If you take away anything from Von Doom's research, let it be. This human civilization wasn't a sudden happy accident caused by someone discovering how to plant a row of wheat.
Civilization was the long, inevitable accumulation of human brains figuring out how to externalize memory into the physical world.
Whether they were downloading a mental template into an Achillean hand axe, etching meaning into a Jiahu bone flute, standardizing a jade carving, or organizing a community to raise a massive stone pillar at Karahan Tepe, they were painstakingly building the invisible cognitive scaffolds of society.
Take a moment to consider that you use these exact same types of symbolic scaffolds every single day.
Yeah, we do.
You use them to coordinate with your coworkers, to navigate the unwritten rules of your city, and to understand your culture just like our ancestors did 300,000 years ago.
Yeah.
The hardware in your skull is the exact same. The fundamental drive to share meaning is the same.
Which leaves us with one final kind of wild angle to ponder. If ancient monuments and early writing were ultimately just prehistoric tools to physically externalize human memory into the environment, what happens to us now?
That's a chilling thought.
Right. Today, we are rapidly outsourcing our own cognitive scaffolds entirely to the digital cloud and to artificial intelligence. Our memories, our societal rules, our vast databases, they do not require multi-ton stones or jade carvings or even physical space anymore.
They're just servers in a data center.
Exactly. So, if our modern symbolic systems are entirely digital, weightless, and invisible, will our spectacular modern civilization be completely invisible to archaeologists 10,000 years from now?
Without physical redundancy, without carving our symbols into stone or bone, we might just look like a massive, inexplicable gap in the archaeological record.
We've gone from carving stone pillars to uploading into the digital cloud, and somehow the mysteries of human memory remain just as deep. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time as we keep unpacking the invisible forces that shape our world.